Good evening and welcome to our program this evening on the Lucy Depp community. I am Donna Meyer, the Executive Director of the Delaware County Historical Society. Though we've had many live programs at the barn at Stratford for quite a few years, with the pandemic, we had to switch to having virtual programs. It was not ideal. In some ways, it's better because you don't have to leave the warmth of your home to watch them. It's very snowy out here. I know Billy is in California, can't experience that white wonderland, and I'm sure he misses. Last year we had three virtual programs, and this is the second one that we've had this year. Next month, we will present a virtual program titled Cultural Communities, Early Delaware County Settlers and American Indians. That's going to be a fantastic program. Will be held on March 25th, so mark your calendars. Does anybody mark a calendar? We're just marking our phones, aren't we? Isn't that what we're doing?
I do both.
We expect you to have virtual programs for the most, if not all of the year, so be sure to check our website out for more information. Celebrating Black History Month, tonight's program will be a series of interviews of those who have lived or are still living in the Lucy Depp community. You will see Zelda Mcdaniel, and she's actually right there at the top.
Hello.
Different places, all right. The Bohannon family and Michael Hamilton, who's also one of our panelists. After the video, we will be introducing our panelists, which include Zelda Mcdaniel and her brother, Billy Mcdaniel, Theresa Deering, and Michael Hamilton. Also appearing as a panelist is Gwen Stetler, a former resident of the community who, along with Zelda, scheduled the interviews. Gwen is the interviewer during the video segment. Each panelist will be able to ask questions and further expand on their association with the Lucy Depp community. You can ask your questions in the chat box at the bottom of your screen, and periodically I'll ask the questions of the panelists. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you will not be able to ask questions. I want to thank our volunteer videographer, Brad Cowan, who came out on a snowy day to get the video, and volunteer Diane Williams, who with her magic skills created the video that you're about to see. One comment before I start the program: the video goes in and out of focus several times. If you squint like I have to see anything at all, it will look just fine. For more information on the Lucy Depp Settlement, please go to their website at lucydeppark.com. That's 3 P's in a row. If you enjoy this program, please visit our website at www.delawareohiohistory.org to make a donation or learn about our other programs. So I'm going to start with the video.
My name is Zelda Mcdaniel. My parents were Cleona and William Mcdaniel. My father, everyone called him Mac, and my brother, William McDaniel, and he was commonly known as Billy.
Yeah, still is.
It still is, yes, at this age, yeah, Billy.
So when did your family move to Lucy Depp Park?
We moved here in 1957 from Columbus. We lived on the east side of Columbus, and it wasn't a very desirable place to live, so my mother wanted a better life for her children, and so she wanted to get out of Columbus, but the opportunities just weren't there. With segregation, they couldn't find fair housing, bank loans were hard to get, and so she purchased these 2 tiny wooded lots out here when she was young, way before she got married. We often think that she maybe had a vision even way back then, because she was young. So in the years to come, we decided to build a small house out here in Lucy Depp where we could get more opportunities.
Would you say it was pretty rare when you were growing up for there to be Black-owned land?
Absolutely.
So, So this, yes, experience here in Delaware County was a pretty rare thing.
Yes.
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 Okay. Is there any story or reflection about living in, you're speaking to it some now, but a place with such civil rights history, and we've talked about this. You said you just glimpses of information about the Underground Railroad, but not details. So
When we were growing up out here, no, we didn't really know anything about the Underground Railroad. The only thing I knew about the Underground Railroad was what Mr. Bailey, our history teacher at Dublin High School, taught about the Underground Railroad, and that was always in a negative, very negative light.
So what's some of your favorite parts of living here and going to school? What grade were you in school when you came here?
Oh my goodness, I was in elementary, Jerome Elementary School, so what, 5th, 6th grade, something like that.
Okay. So what, some of your favorite memories for you, your brother, your kids, family?
Well, we had a lot of really good memories out here. I guess one of my favorite memories would be every Thursday night, our favorite pastime with the young people that lived here in the park would be we would all get together and go skating. That was a big thing back in the 50s for teenagers. And so, again, we were in the throes of segregation, so our night to go skating was Thursday night. That was for the Afro-Americans. And we, coupled with another community in Delaware, Ohio, a small black community in Delaware, and another small black community in Worthington, and the three communities would get together. We all go to the skating rink, and it was a blast.
Well, I noticed you have just some pictures here, many pictures, but some. There's Julia and your grandson.
Yeah. This is a picture of my mother and Gwen Stetler. I'm sorry, and Gwen Stetler, Gary Stetler, and their two children. My mother met Gwen when, about what year was that?
1993.
1993, and she encouraged the Stetlers to purchase the good home here. The Stetlers moved out here and did like 25 or 30 years worth of research.
It is your mom. Part of what we're talking about today is the history of black-owned land in the Underground Railroad. Your mom invited us to live here as a Caucasian family. And that was something that we didn't ever take lightly. She introduced us to the owners of the house. Actually, if we want to share these things together here. Yeah. So this, you all, I know you shared. There's your picture here, Zelda, when we moved as a gift, that she introduced us to the owners at that time, the people who had owned the house, the Reverend Dr. Bill Williams, that worked for the Ohio Department of Education, and the Irene Williams was a Oklahoma City School social worker. And so what your mom did, though, is there was a grant from the Council for Older Adults. You served on that board, didn't you? Source Point? Yeah. And it was to bring people together across cultures and race and economics and to build community. And the people that came from there, it just made all the difference in the world. So, are there other pictures that you want to share?
My iPad, oh gosh. This is another picture of my brother, my father, my mother, and myself when we were chosen Family of the Year at the YMCA. This is many years ago. This is way before we moved out here to Lucy Depp Park. I couldn't find the pictures I was looking for. This is a picture of another family. Actually, this is Theresa Hopkins and her entire family that lived across the road. Theresa is the president of our civic association, and this is a picture of them when they were growing up out here.
So I know you told me, Zelda, that in the picture there, it's from France in the background, and Billy, William Foster McDaniel, studied in, piano in France, and I know your mom felt strongly that music was a pathway to...
I was looking for that picture. My brother received a Fulbright scholarship to study in Paris, France for a year, and he's quite a world-renowned concert pianist, so that's a good thing that came out of living out here. And that's what I mean when I say better opportunities, although that process started when we lived in Columbus, of course, but it carried on out here.
That's wonderful. Well, I personally, for us to do these interviews, you, your grandson Julian, and daughter Rhonda, you know, walk door to door to contact people. So that's a very big deal. Did you have any anything else you wanted to share?
It's been a joy living out here, knowing about the history and the struggles and the accomplishments. Even as old as I am, has given me a sense of pride and something that I know my family will carry on, because I pounded it in their head, and I know they'll carry on our legacy.
And so I do have a response here. We are sharing both about the Underground Railroad. You mentioned some research, and I'll be sharing some things that I happen to have the joy of getting to serve as the community chaplain here, and now work in Family Promise in Delaware County, and still stay involved with the civic as a lifelong family. So, but in terms of the history that we want to share first, I do have to say, in terms of just a dedicated researcher, I certainly was, but my husband was profoundly into this, so I want to share that. We had this in our barn, and so the barn, there's a picture of it here, we'll talk about it later. Welcome to Lucy Depp Park. We would greet people here. The family of Abram and Lucinda Depp settled here in 1835. Prior to that, American Indians knew this sacred land well. Hospitality was actively practiced here at the Depp station of the Underground Railroad. This would be the settlers, have been told that the bell was called, the bell was rung when sojourners could have safe passage to the house and barn on the Underground Railroad. Decades later, Robert Good and his first wife, Nan, who happens to be, that was great aunt, Michael Hamilton, another resident, and later the second wife, Callie, and I will, the sidebar, what we have been told is that Callie was light-skinned, African-American female. There's a picture of her right here. She had her gloves on. She took such pride and dignity in this living here, as you described with your mom. Yeah. And really, just to have the opportunity to live here is a pretty profound thing. But she, to create a black subdivision, the story is that she fooled the Delaware County Commissioners and passed, and that she, as a woman, African-American female, got a subdivision. We had the original plat map in our former house, and it was not just about this being a black subdivision, which was so critically important. It was about preservation of black-owned land, because once it was a subdivision, then it could be marketed, and primarily through black churches. So that was the preservation that happened through that. They were also able to create an entrepreneurial social enterprise, because as they sold the lots, it became not only self-preservation, but a way to earn excellent income. they began marketing the lots again through historic black churches. Some residents had been living permanently in the area, the legacy generation to generation since the 1830s. Again, and then families later on came here to live full-time, and others built summer cottages. For first settlers, the Depps, the barn was the hub of the farm. Animals, hay and all. During the good era, it remained a focal point of the era. Now the community center for gatherings, for picnics. Lots of jazz, a beautiful piano from Boston. For several decades, it then became a storage spot for an old tractor, actually. That became, I think, Mike Hamilton's mom's tractor to mow the land. We are forever grateful to Cleona Mcdaniel and her family, who, in her very sweet and sincere way, invited us to live here. She just had that twinkle in her eye. We're going to find a way for you to do this. And another friend who said, we believe you've been sent here to mourn with us as things change. And we'll figure out, and helped us figure out a way over a 2-year period to purchase the Underground Railroad home here. We also want to thank, as I've mentioned before, the Williams family for entrusting us to purchase from them. They've been wonderful too. To our sons, Brad and Ben, for accepting a very new and amazing experience. And those that they've loved along the way have done the same. To our parents and the Civic Association and this beloved community who've taught us how to live the Golden Rule. And after 9/11 tragedy, this place became a place for interfaith open houses and a place to extend hospitality and to teach what it means to truly include and to teach a sense of belonging. And continues by what we're doing today to be a place for intentional conversation, consultation, and community building. If you could, for everybody, could you introduce yourselves, please?
Okay, Maggie Bohannon.
Nevaeh Underwood.
Leonard C. Bohannon, Sr., and it's wonderful to have you into our home again.
Grateful.
Amen.
When did you move to Lucy Depp Park?
I came to Ohio 1957, January the 7th. When I got out the train down Union Station, I had $1.35 in my pocket. A wife and 3 kids in Georgia. Came from Cedartown, Georgia.
Cedartown, Georgia. Okay, I gotcha. And how did you end up deciding to move to Lucy Depp Park? Was it available or what?
I worked with a gentleman that stayed in Shawnee Hills, Pearlie McKnight. And he told me that it was an addition up here for black folk. And by me being a farm boy, you know, I like the country. And so I came up and I bought 2 lots. The first house on the right, I built that house and started in 58, and we moved in it in 59, just before Christmas.
Did you try to get land anywhere else and have any challenges at that point?
Well, when I came here, we settled in Columbus, while I've been in Columbus. And one of my sons, my wife was pregnant when I left. And so I came in January, he was born in March, I believe it was.
Yeah, March.
And,
March the 12th, March the 13th.
And he turned 30 days over in Columbus. And so we came here, and when I came here in 57, I came up on a Jim Crow train.
How would you describe that? What does that mean to you?
That means from Cedartown to Cincinnati, you had a special coach that you couldn't sit with the white folk. You had a special coach that you had to sit in. And so when I same train in Cincinnati, across the Mason-Dixie line, you could sit where you want to sit there. And that was joyful because in Cedartown, they had signs set up. Most of them used the N-word, but when they was polite, they would use color.
What were some of your experiences as you moved here? You raised a family here.
When we came here, and after we Zelda and Lucy Depp, things was better here than it was in Georgia. The only difference was in Georgia, you knew what to do and what not to do. Here you were supposed to have the privilege to do it, but it still was a lot of Jim Crow.
Can you think of other memories here you want to make sure that we just know of what it means to have lived in a place like Lucy Depp Park where you could own land, you could be here and raise your family?
And like I said, by being a country boy, I like to, to spread my wings a little bit. And when I bought that place down there, and it was a wrecking yard here. While we sitting there right now, I used to work on automobiles. From this wall there, from this wall here to that wall over there, used to be I used to work on automobiles.
We're actually trying to remember some of the Underground Railroad history as we go to each stop, and I started sharing something from about Abram Depp, and I don't know, you probably remember this part, that when you came here, did you know about the Underground Railroad history, or was it just kind of a
I heard
glimpse?
just a little bit of
Just like just little bits and pieces. Okay.
Right.
Well, initially, Abram Depp purchased 300 acres of land from Joseph Sullivan on June 3rd, 1835, and 90 acres from Abram Smith. So this was military, Virginia military land grant land. We do understand from research that over years, it was over 1,500 acres here in Delaware County, Union County, and Franklin were owned by that family. That's incredible.
That is.
That's incredible. Ohio County records show other land purchases by the Depp family, mother of the old Lucy, brother Stephen, sister Esther, her husband Miles Depp, and children Esther and Lavinia, Pocahontas, Walker, Mike, and Simon. These land purchases were adjacent to each other in Delaware County, Concord Township, Union County, Jerome Township, and Franklin County, in total 1,500 acres. This comes from the research from the genealogist. So, in so many ways, you're being here, you're trusting to make that journey on what you call the Jim Crow train from Georgia to here, finding out about this place, this black subdivision. You are a part of this legacy.
When I came here to Lucy Depp, met so many wonderful people. And I don't think I never met a person I didn't like.
Well, we love you all. And I want to thank you for your time.
Okay, I'm Michael Hamilton. I am a longtime resident of Lucy Depp Park. My grandparents moved down here in the mid 1930s, with my mother and her elder brother, and for his health, actually, was the original reason. He moved down here because his uncle was Robert Good. And Robert Good is the person who owned Lucy Depp Park and purchased it from Lucy Depp back in the 1920s, maybe 1925 or so. And so anyway, so he helped Mr. Robert Good, Uncle Rob, who we used to call him, clear property and prepare lots for people who were going to build. And they would chop trees down and clear brush and just tough work. And so they would help sell the lots and just establish themselves as a family here in our community back in the 30s. So it's been in the property for over 80 years.
So in terms of understanding the Underground Railroad history and the Black history of this place, when did you come to understand more what this place meant?
Well, growing up here, it was a normal area. At the time, I had no idea that I lived 200 yards from a cemetery where freed slaves, as well as a Civil War veteran, were buried. Had no idea, not a clue.
This is another excerpt from some research from an article entitled "In Bondage and Freedom." Powhatan County bondsman Abraham Depp managed his own blacksmith shop. He served customers, arranged for payments, advanced credit, and traveled to Richmond to purchase iron, steel, leather, and other supplies. Diligent, hardworking, and astute. Wherever it happened that the day did not allow sufficient time to accomplish the work before him, the wife of his owner observed of Depp, the night supplied the deficiency. After a number of years and following his master's death, Depp gained his freedom and secured legal title to the enterprise he had managed so successfully as a slave, and eventually came to the Depp Settlement here in Delaware County, Ohio.
I knew of Uncle Rob. He was alive when I was born, but I didn't know him. I was a child. I knew Callie Good, his second wife. But it was, it was just a normal place to live and grow up.
Well, that sounds like a beautiful thing,
yeah,
too.
Yeah.
So what, in terms of your favorite memories of growing up here, what comes to mind?
Hanging out with the neighbors and all of my friends, the Reeds, the Mitchells, the Holmeses, the Hugheses, the Hopkinses. I can go on and on. We were a very close community. When we were able to ride bicycles, it was like a new freedom. We were able to get to go farther away and explore more and learn more about people. And of course, by that time we had left Jerome, and it was probably starting to go to Dublin High School, where we experienced a new set of friends. Some of us had a tougher time.
Are there any, sadly, are there any examples of?
Nothing I want to get real specific with, but racism did exist. It was hidden. It wasn't outright. They didn't do it in front of their friends unless their friends were also a part of it. But my friends, I had good friends in high school, and I love them dearly, and I still see them today. and we have a good time. We don't always agree on things, but there's nothing we wouldn't do for each other. And that's the kind of experience I had.
Well, I know you have recently been active with a lot of us with the Civic Association, get markers here. You've been part of reenactments related to Abraham Depp. I know I'm looking at the barn in the house where we lived, and I know that you painted all that lettering on there, and so you've been extensively involved with really kind of honoring the history. You had some pictures, and I don't know if you want to share anything about them.
Yeah, sure. Well, some of these are my mother. First of all, we have a box camera, the old Kodak camera, popular back in the 20s. I guess that's when it started. Early, late teens, 1800s, or 19 or so. But anyway, they took photographs a lot. They were, I don't know who specifically. I assume it was Uncle Rob and maybe my grandfather. I know my uncle, who was around him, became a amateur photographer.
Well, I know you did this for us when we moved, and we just love it. It's just the pictures there are really incredible.
Yeah, they're I mean, not only historic, but they tell a lot. And of course, they've been in a box for I don't know how long. And I finally pulled some of these out, and some of them are just real gems. And like I said, my mom was she was involved in. She loved cutting grass. For some reason, she was on a tractor all the time. So she that was just natural for her. She was a phys ed teacher at Scioto Village, the juvenile facility just up the street, for over 30 years. She was hands-on. She loved the area, and she's a part of the area. She was here as a child. They would come down from Akron before they even lived here. They would come down and visit. So that's the and yet I still didn't know about the Depps at the time. So.
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned Colleen Bryce Mitchell, the Mitchell family, and it was a pivotal moment for us when Colleen and Trusted shared. There was one article. She said it was one article that she had that, and we just had a couple pieces in a folder, and that article. Now, with the research that we found, it was from an old Dublin newspaper that doesn't exist.
Oh, right.
And now, all that information, there's so much more that we have, but it's just fascinating that if that one journal wouldn't have appeared, in a way that someone could do a life of research, that researcher, but yet the local citizens not even know about it. It's fascinating. So, because like you said, others have said, people did not know that research. Well, I just want to say, for all that you've done for and with the community, and I also know you to be a really incredible artist that runs in the family along with this history love. I just want to say thank you. Well, we're grateful to have Troy here. Anybody who's lived here in the community knows it's so much gratitude for what you personally in the district are doing to try to make sure that the name of the Depp family and the history and understanding of the Underground Railroad and Black-owned land is understood.
Yeah, and I was very fortunate to, I've worked in Dublin schools for 25 years, and I've worked at 4 schools, and they've all been named after a famous kind of local community leader. And when I understood that the new school up in Jerome Village in Union County was going to be named after Abraham Depp, the first Black American, this first school to be named after African American, has been just an honor. And I think when I can I hear terms like family and tradition and legacy, that's something that we really want to carry on with our youth at our new school.
Well, from a personal note, I know we lived in a home with Underground Railroad history, and I know that the school has decided to do something very special with, we found the all clear bell that was the signature bell for letting freed persons know that they could safely come to the Underground Railroad site. We found it in a clump in the barn. And I remember Gary putting it together, but you're doing something really wonderful
Absolutely.
to help teach around it.
Absolutely, and I think when I got the position at the new school as principal, it was in the summer of 2019. We didn't open the school until the fall of 2020. So I had a year to really help build the staff, the community, but I came over and talked to the Bookmeyer family and the Stetlers and just talked about, I want to know more about the name. Who is Abraham Depp? I drove by Lucy Depp Park for 20 years. I'm away to my previous positions, but now when I get to kind of learn more about the family, connecting with what the bell meant as an all-clear bell, and I think that's something that we want to continue to carry on that legacy with our kids at school. And we, with membership and participation, or I guess support of the Lucy Depp Civic Association, we have a bell that's been, a replica bell that's been donated to our school, and it's currently in storage at Abraham Depp Elementary School, and we are building a nice brick podium for it, and we're going to have it out in front of our school, and it's going to kind of run along what's going to be our kindness garden. So I think when you see, you know, something from back in the early 1800s that stood on this land, we're going to carry on that legacy over almost 200 years later. Is going to be the fun part of teaching the history to our students. Wow,
and it's really interesting that this family and this community is bringing counties and communities together, because it's your Dublin schools in Union County. Lucy Depp Park, the housing subdivision, is in Delaware County. And then there's a lot of connection, as we know, with the Underground Railroad with Columbus.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think just with learning about this area of Delaware County and, you know, along the Scioto River, I know there's some land over there where some of the headstones of some of the family members are and I think there's just so much. I mean, being in education, I mean, it's just, that's the fun part of really, how else can we carry on this legacy and teach students and families about the Depp name, and, you know, primarily up in Plain City, Union County area, but we are going to continue to just learn more about it. I think it's every time I read about it, I learn something new, and I think we've had, you know, Mr. Hamilton, and we've had storytelling nights with our new community members. We have 650 students at our school and over like 530 families. And as we can continue to kind of get that ripple effect about the name of our school, I think that's going to become more powerful as we start to build upon his legacy.
Well, and you mentioned the cemetery in the research. So we know the USDA was here twice, and that there were we believe that there's probably at least a dozen in the Depp family buried there, including old mother Lucinda. There's 3 different Lucindas in this family story, but she is the mother of Abraham, who made this journey here from Powhatan County, which it's incredible. So to think that the students are going to have an opportunity to continue to learn about
that. I think that's one part that I really wanted that the foundation of this learning comes from the kids.
Right.
And I think when we started, we opened up the doors, you know, under different circumstances this year with the pandemic, but we don't have all 635 kids in the school at once. But when you listen to the stories from Zelda and Theresa and other members of the association about how Abraham Depp and the Depp family brought people together, and there was a focus on family, and they went through struggles and they had accomplishments. That's what we're working with kids. I mean, we have 5- and 6-year-old kids that are going to go through challenges, and if we can continue to make, you know, connections to blazing a trail to freedom and blazing a trail for opportunity, right. I think that's going to be, you know, definitely, I think it's just the tip of the iceberg and what we're going to share. And I want to kind of showcase our, speaking of blazing a trail, we started the year as just Abraham Depp Elementary School. We really didn't have a school mascot. Mm-hmm. So we had a journey together with our community and voted upon different types of mascots, different type of names. And Trailblazers was the winner. And I think we were able to go into every single classroom and talk to the children about, you know, kind of a short story about Abraham Depp. And Trailblazers really stood out because he blazed a trail from, you know, Powhatan County in Virginia, and came up here. And I think that's what our kids are going to continue to do in Union County at our school, is to blaze a trail for new opportunities for our community.
Well, we thank you. The community thanks you, and certainly our family personally thanks you. I appreciate all that you're doing.
Thank you.
There's one piece of research here related to the Underground Railroad. This comes from the genealogist. So this is from the historical background of the Depp family, Powhatan County, Virginia, the genealogist, volume 17, number 1, spring 2003. And I am so grateful to Gary, my husband, for finding it. In 1801, a deed of emancipation was filed by John Depp, a white tobacco plantation owner in Powhatan County, Virginia, which granted freedom to the children of Lucy Depp, black, upon the death of John and his wife Elizabeth. They would come from a Huguenot background. His will stated that as he had long the benefit, this is just profound to me, his will said that he had long had the benefit of their labor, justice, and good conscience require that I make provision for them. That was written into his will. The children named in the deed and the birth dates were Lucinda, 1788, Lucinda, 1788, Abraham, 1791, Salisbury, 1793, Stephen, 1795, Esther, 1797 was her birthday, Delilah, 1800. John Depp's will gave specific tracts of his land in Powhatan County to Abram, Salisbury, Stephen, and Miles. Esther was his wife, totaling over 540 acres. John Depp died, and his will was proved in 1831. A provision in his will freed Abram immediately. The children, Lucinda and Delilah, were evidently deceased by this time. The rest of the family would not receive their freedom until the death of the widow, Elizabeth, in 1835. As a freed man, Abram Depp traveled to the Ohio lands in 1835 and worked as a blacksmith in his trade in Columbus. It was during this time that he located land for sale north of Columbus in Delaware County. Upon the death of widow Elizabeth in 1835, he returned to Powhatan County to settle the family affairs and bring his family to Ohio. He set out with his wife, Mary Good, and children Evelina, Matilda, and Aurelius. Mary died during the trip. Other members of the Depp family arrived here in 1836. And again, I say, as long as he had the benefit of their labor, justice, and good conscience, required him to make provisions, and that's how this land came to be.
We have a couple questions, and I'm going to, first of all, ask Billy McDaniel to talk about his experience at Lucy Depp. One question someone asked is, can someone explain what a Jim Crow train is? Who wants to address that?
What I heard him say, because it was profound when I heard the term. He said it was, we came up from Georgia, and in the Jim Crow train we were separated. It was segregated, and then when we got to Cincinnati, it wasn't segregated anymore. So he talked about just that distinction of getting to Ohio and what what it felt like, what it looked like. And but yeah, just talked about the distinct separation, the different cars, and the way you had to sit and interact with each other. And not.
Well, Jim Crow was a system that was put in place in the South after or during Reconstruction, where the white race and the Negro race, or the Black people, were totally segregated, separated from whites in many ways, whether it was school, whether it was restaurants, whether it was transportation, whether it was hospitals, just about in every aspect of life. And this was something that existed in the South, and it was fortified by laws. There were many, many laws placed all over the South. And that's basically what a large part of the civil rights struggle of the 1950s and 60s was about. It was a protest against the laws and against the customs in the South that said, for example, even water fountains. I remember that being a big thing. There would be colored water fountains and white water fountains, and Black people were not allowed in restaurants, in many stores. It was pervasive. So that's what Jim Crow was. And it didn't stop until practically 1970. It existed for a long, long time.
And then there's the book, The New Jim Crow. The author was at Lucy Depp Park.
And also, another thing about Jim Crow was something that existed in the South. It did not exist according to law. There were no laws in the North, but there was a subtle form that was somewhat similar. I mean, schools were segregated, restaurants were segregated. Many neighborhoods, of course, were very segregated. I think there may be still some of that going on these days. And that has a lot to do with what Lucy Depp was all about, Lucy Depp offered a place. One thing that I don't think was very clear from the interview with Bohannon is during the 1950s, late 40s and 50s, after the Second World War, suburbia became a huge dream in this country. Everybody moved to the suburbs, but that was not possible for Black people. So Lucy Depp was extraordinary because it was practically the only place where a Black person could live outside of an urban area.
Thank you for that. Somebody had asked about famous people who visited Lucy Depp, and I know on your website you have a picture of Joe Louis. Does anybody want to talk about anyone else who visited Lucy Depp? I know you had some folks from Columbus that came up and sort of used as a resort area.
Well, from what I've heard, Nancy Wilson was acquainted with Robert Good. She was here. The musicians, I wish they had chronicled and wrote these things down, but they didn't do that back then. So people, I mean, from word of mouth, if you were in town, this was the place to come out if you were a Black person. Joe Louis came out. He knew one of the residents here. I would have given $1 million to be a fly on the wall in this area at that time. But unfortunately, yeah, I wish, and also I had talked to my mom when I got the photographs out, and I just went through them with her and got all the information down that I could. And man, if I could have done that with my grandparents, we would have had a treasure trove of information. But unfortunately, those things don't happen when you're young. You don't even think about them.
But there are a lot of jazz musicians. Paul Tyler, Garnett, William Foster McDaniel, who's on the screen now in terms of musicians, but there's a great legacy around that. And I was serious with there's a New York Times now journalist Dr. Michelle Alexander, who wrote The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration. She spent time with us in the last 5 years out just trying to understand current dynamics related. And this was amidst a lot of interfaith community building too. It was an honor to have her around.
I'm going to ask Theresa to talk about her experience growing up because she wasn't able to participate in the original interviews. So Theresa, you want to talk about Lucy Depp and what it was like living there? Are you still there?
Absolutely. Can you hear me? You guys can hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Well, my name is Theresa Hopkins Deering, and I moved to Lucy Depp Park in Labor Day weekend, 1964. My dad, Ted Hopkins, my mother, Phyllis, they purchased some lots there in November of 1963. And my dad loved fishing. And he would get off his job. He worked at Swan Cleaners, and he would go up to Twin Lakes and fish along the Scioto. And he and his brothers, Uncle Clyde, Lonnie, and Bill, literally built our home. My dad purchased a prefabricated home, and they had the foundation built professionally, but from the basement on up, our Cape Cod was literally built. Well, my dad would get off from work and drive up to Lucy Depp, meet his brothers, and build our home. And gee, it was fantastic to see our house being built, because we moved in from Columbus as well. And my dad wanted to own his own home. And, at the time, we couldn't go buy property anywhere, our family. So we went to Dublin High School with my sisters there and brothers, two brothers. My brother and I was going in my freshman year, and my brother Ted Jr. was going into his junior year. And we were sitting outside the office there to register for school. And Coach Millizer walked by and saw my brother and asked him, could he play football? And Hoppy lit up, Junior, we called him Junior. He lit up. And so we were so well received at Dublin High School. We had fun. I was a little reluctant to leave my friends from Columbus, but every weekend, many of them would come up, and we had slumber parties, sleepovers, picnics. My two sisters and younger brother went to Jerome Elementary, and they had a good experience as well. We all graduated from Dublin High School, and friends with the Bohannons. Miss Maggie was my mom's, was her bestie, and their large family. We would just have dinners together, picnics. I watched Mrs. Watley's home being built. The Barrow family lived there. I used to babysit them. The homes were right down the road. Mrs. Burton was there, who really helped out with the Civic Association, along with Mrs. Watley's late husband, Stan. They were charter members of the Lucy Depp Park Civic Association. It was a truly great neighborhood. If you needed a ride in town, someone would get on the phone, get your ride in. And we just it was a great sense of community, Michael, we rode the bus together. Zelda, we had the best bus driver in the world, old Bunny. He'd wait on us. And if we were running down the road, we'd get on that bus and get to school. And just, Claudia, we just had a great time. We didn't know anything about Jim Crow, by the way. Our parents, I guess you could say, they loved us so much, they protected us from all the racism that was going on, which was going on. In my senior year, Dr. King was assassinated, Dr. Martin Luther King, and going to school and hearing, the words of what was going on in our country. Robert Kennedy, he was assassinated on my graduation day. So we lived through the civil rights era, and it was just, it was an ugly time, but I think the love we had in our community, we just made the best and the best of times. It was unique. I happened to be married to an heir of the Abraham Depp family. Stephen Depp, who's Abram's brother, is my husband's great nephew. So when we were dating, he'd come out to Lucy Depp, and he always told me he had some connection there, but he really didn't know the story. He didn't know the history. We didn't know about the Underground Railroad as well. but he has a cousin who's a genealogist expert, Lorraine Harris, and you've met her, Gwen. She came up with her other cousin, and she put a lot of the pieces together. So we have photographs of his lineage, his family, and great photos. And it's just it's an honor to be able to share this legacy with the community, with the school, Abram Depp, that Troy has just been remarkable putting the school together with the culture of the, and I'm just excited about being a part. So my son lives in our home there now with his family, and his two children attend, one is at Eli Penny and Malachi, and Bayani is at Willard Grizel, who was our principal at the time when we were at Dublin. And so, yeah, it's great. It's just I've had a great experience. I believe that history that was explained by Gwen with the Underground Railroad and how Abram Depp journeyed here to Ohio, how he befriended Lucas Sullivan and acquired that land that is so sacred as we all know it to be. So I thank you for inviting us, and I really appreciate the Delaware County Historical Society. Donna, thank you so much for this input. This has been great, really great.
Well, thank you, Theresa. I really appreciate your input. It's so interesting to hear how you grew up and how you had a really wonderful bus driver. They make all the difference when you're going to school, don't they?
They do.
Someone asked a question, how many homes are in Lucy Depp Park? And then somebody else commented, we never said where it was. So who wants to talk about that?
Well, I think back when we were growing up through there, it was about 30 homes. And now there may be, 40, 45 homes.
Actually, I have
correct, Mike?
Yeah, I have
the figures.
Yeah, I figured it. I sat down and marked it down a couple of weeks ago. There are 57 homes here. 53 of them are occupied.
Okay.
And you want to talk about where exactly it is, Michael?
We are on Dublin Road, Route 745, 5 miles north of Dublin, just across a stone throw from the zoo. Twin Lakes is just to our north. So if you're driving through and you leave Shawnee Hills and you see Twin Lakes, you passed us.
You may have caught in the research that at one point there were 1,500 acres of land that were Black owned by the Depp family. That straddled Delaware County, Union County, and that Franklin County intersection all together there.
Billy, you want to talk about growing up in Lucy Depp and what that meant to you?
I can't really say that I grew up in Lucy Depp. I was 16, and actually it was my last year of high school. So I spent a year actually living there, 1 year, and then I was pretty much gone except for visiting with my parents off to college and what have you. And so I had a great time when I was there. It was a very different lifestyle from living in the city, but it didn't last that long for me. It was just like one good solid year before I left.
Okay. We have a question. Somebody wanted to know, how did it come out about the Underground Railroad being there? Does anybody want to address that? We've done programs on the Underground Railroad before, and there are a number of homes that are thought to have been on the Underground Railroad in Delaware County. If you go to our website, you can see that. But the Underground Railroad was not underground. It was not a railroad. So Gwen, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So part of what you find in research about the Depp area, the Depp settlement, is that there were some caves along the river that were an initial spot. The river was the key. And then as this bell, the story we talked about the all clear bell, we know that the barn, but also the basement area of the house, 6381 Harriet Road, which in fact, the people who sold us the house, that I just got a text from California. She was trying to get on tonight. She wanted to read. She wrote a small memoir about what she was told as a child about the basement and the filled-in cistern and how the wall moved, and to just hear from that firsthand language of written as an adult, but remembered as a child, the stories of the Underground Railroad memories in the house. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we have research, we have the evidence, and the bell was a big part of it. So what was written in one of the articles was that it was considered a successful Underground Railroad station because basically everybody who traveled along the documentation made it to their destination, many to Canada. Mm-hmm. So that was one of the indicators. And there wasn't a lot written down. So for safety, so sure. That's why it was found out later.
And if you look on your website, you can see pictures of the caves where the slaves supposedly hid as well. Now those caves are under the Scioto River. They were flooded with the O'Shaughnessy Dam, from what I understand.
Right, you're correct.
Okay. All right. Now, like I said, people didn't really talk about the Underground Railroad because there were severe penalties for helping slaves escape. Where I'm sitting now is in the Meeker property in Stratford, and the house is almost 200 years old. And this was also said to have been on the Underground Railroad. And it was just a general path, and they came through Westerville and came along both the Scioto and the Olentangy River to escape to Canada, to freedom. Michael, somebody had a question about the garden?
Yes, the garden. Well, our garden was, we've had a garden in our family since my grandfather moved down here. It was in the front for a while, and then we moved it to the side. And I can remember as a kid having a photograph taken of my own little personal garden. But Larry Seward had come to the community to help with, he's a mentor, and was looking for land where they could have the kids grow and learn about the Black farming community of the area. And so he came out and he made these small gardens on people who agreed to do that. And he came to me, and we probably had the largest area at the time, thanks to my mother, who worked the garden until she was in her 70s. And so she, but anyway, he came to me, and they came out and did it the first year, and it turned out very successful. And then the next year they came to me and asked me if I would enlarge it. And I was hesitant at first, and then I was thinking, well, that's less grass for me to mow. So I agreed to it. So they came out, and they get grants, and they put up a deer fence. It has a watering system now. The kids learn how to go out there and take care of the garden and maintain it. They go to the Powell Farmers Market, and also down in Columbus they go to, and then learn how to sell it. They the money that they get, they go to the banks, financial institutions, and learn how to save their money and invest it. So it's an incredible program, and it's very well received.
Okay. That's a skill that a lot of kids don't know. You know, kids grow up and they don't know how to save money, and they don't know how to, pay bills, that kind of thing. So it's wonderful that you're teaching these kids responsibilities.
It's a great thing that they do. Yeah, it's fantastic. I'm glad to be a part of it. And
plus they're outside and they're not playing on their video games
as much as they want to. Yes, they're not, and the mentors won't let them. They when they're out there to work, and it's a good lesson for them. Yeah, well, I just provide the property. That's all I do.
Well, does anybody else have any other comments that you would like to add? Okay.
Zelda, our neighbor, my Zelda, we lived a stone's throw from each other. So we often had our own slumber parties or staying up.
We would wait till our parents would go to sleep, and then I'd cut across the yard and in her back door and up to her room and stay up all night laughing and get back home before parents, my mom and dad woke up, like I had been here all night.
Yep. And wait for the possum to go by so I could get home or she could get back or whatever. And oh, by the way, my mother and her friends, they did have a benefit for Billy, Zelda's brother, but McDaniel, at the barn a long time ago when he was going over to Paris to study his music. And we went over there and cleaned that barn and had a great benefit for Billy. So a little fundraiser to get him to Paris. And he had a scholarship, so he was okay. But the community worked together. It was just by telephone. We didn't text. We didn't email. We didn't even have that. We just walked along the roads. You could literally keep your key in your automobile, in your car, in your driveway overnight. So you wouldn't lose your keys. You just keep them in your car. That's how safe it was. It's very safe, wonderful.
That was a fabulous party, by the way. You guys should mention the Memorial Day thing, not the Memorial, Labor Day events you have too.
Oh, what a tradition.
Yeah.
What a tradition.
Well, I think our friends on the internet don't know what that is. Would somebody like to talk about that, the Labor Day event?
Well, every Labor Day,
the honor of being able to host it for a number of 20 years, and then there were folks around us that had done some hosting of it. So we had it down at the pond. And if you don't know, there's a pond where it was the only place where children of color could swim for years. So it was, when pools were segregated, the Lucy Depp pond was not. So, so we gathered around the pond for a number of years, had some new traditions around a lot of jazz, Buddy Wood and David Tyler and his dad's legacy, and Arnett Howard, and then we moved it to the barn later on. And but some of the best Zelda, I remember you describing the food when we went up to the Bohannons. Now that is the best fried chicken you're ever going to have. Yeah, a lot of great cooks. So, but that's the love that would go.
A lot of love. Lots of love.
We've got a couple other questions. Somebody wants to know, do houses ever go up for sale in Lucy Depp? So I know you mentioned that there were some houses that maybe were not occupied right now.
Right, yeah, a few people have come up to the owners, and they're still holding on to them. So, and there are a couple of them that I'm not sure about. I know the gentleman had just down the road from the Hopkins house, who died of a heart attack, and then the family left the house. So, and it's there, and it was abandoned. It's still abandoned now. I finally boarded it up. There's some the Nixon house is still there. I don't know if they're open to selling. Quite a few new houses have been built within the last couple of years, 3 or 4 years.
So is there land available for purchase to construct a house?
It's kind of tough to get enough land. You have to have a acre and a half technically because of the sewage to be able to build in Concord Township. Unless you get a variance. Now you can, and a couple of the houses here have gotten variances, and they're back in the woods. And I mean, it's possible, but a lot of the land, there's ravines that's unbuildable on that property, and it would be tough to get enough land together to build the house properly.
Someone else asked a question. Did anyone settle here as a result of travel there on the Underground Railroad? So they certainly couldn't have stopped before the slave laws. When they got to a free state, they could be free. But after the slave laws, they had to go up to Canada. So everyone that was traveling through went up to Canada. I guess the question would be, did they ever remember Lucy Depp and thought, I'm going to come down to Ohio after the emancipation and live there? Do you know any stories about that?
I don't, but this is, we do know that there are probably up to 12 people buried in the cemetery, Lucy Depp Park. And so there are some, you know, we definitely want to preserve and keep these markers safe, but we know that there's old Mother Lucinda. So that would have been what, Abram's mother? And then was it Aurelius who fought the colored troops? War.
Really?
USDA came twice to do research. It was a really big deal. And I know, I believe that there's hopes in the future to do more preservation and signage and things like that.
And you guys did some ground penetrating radar, correct, in your cemetery?
That was USDA.
Okay, yeah. And so could they see other graves that they thought maybe the stones were missing?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
We have another question. Do Shawnee Hills business owners know and appreciate the history of Lucy Depp, and are they supportive of the community? Do they embrace the Lucy Depp residents as a key part of the area? Good question. I know there are a lot of businesses in that area because I shop at the garden shops all the time.
And the editor of the Gazette, she featured for Black History Month about Abram Depp in the Shawnee Hills Village Gazette. What's her name? Her
name is Carol Kender. Carol Kender.
Carol Kender. Yeah. Yes. She comes to meetings or the picnics. I've met her, and she's quite aware of the history, and so she did feature the great story, a little history of Abram Depp, the settlement itself. And
you know what's really interesting? I think there are a whole lot of people who live in Shawnee Hills, Tartan Fields, Muirfield, all around, and through the years have come. And I know when we were living there, talked with us. They thought maybe they were living on land that was originally owned by the Depp family, but some of that's still really unclear. What all lots everywhere, you know, were part of the Depp settlement. So it kind of relates to that question. You know, folks I know we've had recently some Tartan Fields residents that have gotten involved a lot in, you know, how many things related to celebrating the history. So it's just some folks aren't aware that they're living on the land.
Somebody asked if the All Clear Bell could be seen.
Well, you definitely can see it from Harriet Road. If you'd want to make contact with the current residents there, everybody has a little bit different approach. And I know that they have the school groups and other groups that
come through.
But you'd want to make an appointment.
Does it still ring? When?
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, I actually have some video clips that if there's something that you could put on, if you wanted to post, I have the.
Someone else had a question. Does Lucy Depp today identify more with the Delaware or the Dublin communities? It sounds like I identify more with Dublin because the kids went to Dublin school You're kind of close to Union County there. What do you think?
Yeah, when I was, now I identify more with Dublin. When I was growing up, my grandparents, Delaware was the place because that's where everything was. We did our shopping, banking there. We had relatives there, so we would always go to Delaware. We knew everyone there. We knew all of the officials. Dublin was the school and 3 gas stations, and Dublin has exploded in the last I don't know 50 years since I graduated. But Delaware was certainly a part of in the early times. Delaware was definitely a part of what was here.
I'm gonna see if there's any more questions. Somebody said, thank you all. This was so interesting and informative, and I appreciate hearing all the firsthand stories. Just well done. So I appreciate that. Somebody said, do they know the history of Underground Railroad along with the Black families that settled in Upper Arlington? I'm not sure about that. When maybe you have some information.
Well, I know there's been much currently written in the newspaper and some books out, and there's a belief that there is some interconnectedness with at least a couple people with Abram and that station. So were we thinking about that, Michael?
I believe, yeah, I think the thing is that some of the people from Upper Arlington followed Abram Depp up to this area. I think Abram may have been the first one. I'm not quite certain, but and I think it was in the genealogy book that the family names of some of the people from Upper Arlington came up after and probably knew the Depp family.
You're right. You're right.
And also Aurelius Depp married the prominent family, African-American family of Upper Arlington, where I think their gravesite was just discovered underneath the school, the high school. So, but Aurelius was married, and this is where I need Wynn's cousin, Winford, my husband, Lorraine. She's the genealogist of his family, our family.
Gary too.
Yeah, and she knows the names, and there is a book with all of this information is just coming out right now. I mean, as far as I know, but
it was just in the chat.
Yeah, and there was
Litchford is one of the names.
Litchford, yeah. Litchford.
And the comment said there is a new book called Secrets Under the Parking Lot, the true story of Upper Arlington from the early 1800s, published by 2 Upper Arlington residents that speak of the Depp family and their relationship to the Black community that was established at the same time in Upper Arlington. So for further reading, check that out, Secrets Under the Parking Lot.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm writing that down. Okay, yeah.
Okay, well, it's late. This program has run a lot longer than I expected, but that's okay. We got some wonderful stories and some great dialogue. So I appreciate everybody participating. So thank you all so much and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye, thank you.
So, appreciate all the effort.